Okay, we're back with another A Course in Miracles live stream here on March 28th in the year 2025, if you can believe it, living in the future. Honestly, today was kind of a hard day for me here, I have to admit. I feel like coming to a place where all of my shit is just like up in my face and I can't avoid it. I've been learning how to do emotional repression inquiry, and that's come along with just some major life shifts that have been happening here. The end of a 10-year relationship. I'm going to move out of the place I've been living. Just a lot of change. And as I'm coming out of emotional repression, it's like just seeing my own patterning being reflected back to me so clearly that it can be really overwhelming at times. Learning how to be more honest, how to communicate what's actually going on for me rather than just kind of zoning out and claiming peace when it's not actually real. And today just felt like I was just suffering in my relationships. And, I think it's just learning how to be really more in the guidance of each instant being in integrity within myself. But part of that process is really seeing where we've been out of integrity. I've been out of integrity throughout the lifetime. I mean, based on kind of these deep emotional wounds from childhood, we learn how to get our needs met in these ways that are kind of unconscious. And as the light starts to come in more and more, these unconscious ways of getting our needs met in relationships just aren't going to suffice anymore because they're just pure suffering. Anytime we're trying to get something from the other, and that's really what I was seeing today, trying to get something from the relationship and then feeling just so frustrated that I can't seem to get it from them, and the tendency to want to blame them. But I just know, like, I've become too aware that that's not really, doesn't make any sense, that it's me, it's myself. So it's grace to see this, but it's also honestly profoundly painful at times. And, I've kind of been able to take some time and ground in and do some inquiry around it, and I'm feeling a lot more kind of balanced or whatever, kind of resourced within myself now. So that's beautiful. It's kind of funny how at the end of a day, no matter how hard it was, as these things sort of pass, they're kind of like gone. So I'm speaking about it from memory, but it doesn't feel like it's here now. But just wanted to share that there's been... And the other part was just, I think, seeing where I have a hard time kind of knowing what I actually want in any given moment and being honest about that. Knowing what I want and being honest about it, communicating it in an honest way, and feeling the suffering that comes from that. So maybe that kind of sets the stage for us to tune into the Holy Spirit's guidance here. We can put up a prayer from our hearts. I'm going to put up a prayer from my heart that may I receive support in coming to peace and wholeness around these things. I mean, I've only kind of just scratched the surface of what's been going on, but my heart's prayer will cover all the bases and the nuances and the deep particularities of each one of our paths and my own path. And we'll see what comes forward in terms of that guidance, opening the heart to what wants to be shown. It's profound that we get our little dose of kind of suffering each day almost as fuel for the fire so that we can continue to deepen into our devotion to truth, because we have these parts of our own journey to continue forgiving, basically bringing to the light. So we're in the Manual for Teachers. Okay. Part 17. How do God's teachers deal with magic thoughts? And we're in part 7 here. Let's see what the particular sentence is that we've been guided to. It's fun just to see where you end up in a huge book, where you end up by rolling the dice or opening to guidance. Each one says clearly to your frightened mind, you have usurped the place of God. This would, I guess, be the magic thoughts that it's referring to, each magic thought. A magic thought, from my understanding of the Course language, a magic thought is a thought that believes that something other than God can bring us salvation. So from what I was sharing before, in the relational suffering, I was believing that a person and my relationship to them could bring me salvation. That's a magic thought. When something it's any belief that something outside of yourself can bring you salvation or healing. That's a magic thought. So each magic thought says clearly to your frightened mind, you have usurped the place of God. So this is the ego's position. It's a terrifying idea that we are responsible for our own happiness, our own well-being, our own creation, our own salvation. So that's to usurp the place of God. Let's read the whole section and see what else comes forward. How do God's teachers deal with magic thoughts? This is a crucial question both for teacher and pupil. If the issue is mishandled, the teacher of God has hurt himself and has also attacked his pupil. This strengthens fear and makes the magic seem quite real to both of them. I can feel the fear in that the Course uses strong language in order to highlight the contrast between truth and illusion. So, the issue is mishandled, the teacher of God has hurt himself and has also attacked his pupil. This is when we are in erroneous thinking. This strengthens fear and makes the magic seem quite real to both of them. How to deal with magic thus becomes a major lesson for the teacher of God to master. So this is the suffering that I was talking about, that each of us kind of gets a little dose of each day. This is where we've been buying into the magical thinking of this world, that one thing causes another, that we're in linear time, that we have problems that need external solutions. So our ability to deal with these ways of magic thinking are major lessons for us to master. His first responsibility in this is not to attack it. So we don't resolve it by attacking it or judging it or making it wrong. Right? The fear would propose that we need to attack it, we need to get rid of it, we need to remove it from our mind forcibly. But here the Course is correcting us. Course correction. Our responsibility is not to attack it. If a magic thought arouses anger in any form, God's teacher can be sure that he is strengthening his own belief in sin and has condemned himself. He can be sure as well that he has asked for depression, pain, fear, and disaster to come to him. Let him remember then it is not this that he would teach, because it is not this that he would learn. So this comes back to the axiom that we teach what we would learn, and we learn what we would teach. So when we're suffering, we can remember, is this what I want to teach? Do I want to teach suffering? It's just a moment to kind of tune in and see, is this what I'm choosing right now? And you see how strong the habit is, because we've become so conditioned towards these things, and they've become justified in our mind. Like, I have to believe this. By the world's thinking, it's completely justified. And I learned some pretty harsh lessons around this when I was a child, and I was hurt in certain ways, that I need to protect myself, that I need to fight for love, that I need to get my needs met by pleasing people around me. This is all magic thinking, and it leads to profound suffering, anger and sadness. But when we notice that in ourselves, that is the moment to see, is this what I want to continue choosing? And the suffering will propose that you really have to. It's not like always an easy change up in those moments. There is, however, a temptation to respond to magic in a way that reinforces it. Nor is this always obvious. It can in fact be easily concealed beneath a wish to help. It is this double wish that makes the help of little value and must lead to undesired outcomes. Nor should it be forgotten that the outcome that results will always come to teacher and to pupil alike. So oftentimes, the unconsciousness is covered over by a desire to help, to be helpful, to be a helper. Especially, this is speaking to teachers. That's kind of the focus of this. And so it's saying, as teachers, we can often get caught up in the role of wanting to be a teacher, wanting to help, but not going right to the root of the issue. Kind of covering over the double wish, it calls it here. Nor should it be forgotten that the outcome that results will always come to teacher and to pupil alike. How many times has it been emphasized that you give but to yourself? And where could this be better shown than in the kinds of help the teacher of God gives to those who need his aid? Here is his gift most clearly given him, for he will give only what he has chosen for himself. And in this gift is his judgment upon the Holy Son of God. So we give to others as we give to ourselves. If we judge another's suffering, we are judging ourselves. If we judge another's suffering and then use that as justification for our need to help them, then we are making the error real. Saying there really is something wrong with them, and now I need to fix it. So first we're making the error real in our brother, and then by trying to fix it in them, we're actually attacking the illusion of an error in the other. And this is not peace. This is not the miracle. This is not the gift of our Father unto his child. And when we give like that, we also receive like that, which means we cut ourselves off from grace, basically. It is easiest to let error be corrected where it is most apparent. And errors can be recognized by their results. A lesson truly taught can lead to nothing but release for teacher and pupil who have shared in one intent. Attack can enter only if perception of separate goals has entered. So attack enters where we believe that we still have separate goals from one another, and that our goal is not one with the divine as well, that we all are in separation. And this must indeed have been the case if the result is anything but joy. The single aim of the teacher turns the divided goal of the pupil into one direction, with the call for help becoming his one appeal. This then is easily responded to with just one answer, and this answer will enter the teacher's mind unfailingly. From there it shines into his pupil's mind, making it one with his. So you can feel the atonement in this, at-one-ment, making one. When we open to the grace, to the miracle, to the present holy instant, then we can allow that to expand and even be communicated in skillful ways through us, and to bless whatever situation we find ourselves in with the graceful answer that is being sought. We don't even have to know really what the problem is. We just open to the intelligence of the moment and let it sort of unfold in that graceful way. This is what I was kind of seeing today. I was seeing where I was leaning into trying to fix things, trying to figure things out, trying to solve an apparent problem, more in myself than in another. But then also leaning into, wait a second, like this is just a graceful moment. If I just am here and am just giving and just open and just receiving and giving, then where's the suffering? And I could feel that. But then the addiction to going back to the suffering and wanting to figure out my position and my situation and cycling between those two, wanting to fix myself, it's such a habit, such an addiction. And then going into the openness of the holy instant and seeing the contrast between the two is such a powerful teaching. And yet that contrast really highlights the suffering, which is grace, to see it more clearly and see how the functioning is actually operating to create the suffering. At the time it was very painful, but now I can see the lesson in it. Perhaps it will be helpful to remember that no one can be angry at a fact. It is always an interpretation that gives rise to negative emotions. So often it's like, what does this mean about me? What does this mean in general? That's what can lead to anger and the negative emotions, regardless of their seeming justification by what appears as facts, regardless too of the intensity of the anger that is aroused. It may be merely slight irritation, perhaps too mild to be even clearly recognized. Or it may also take the form of intense rage, accompanied by thoughts of violence, fantasied or apparently acted out. It does not matter. All of these reactions are the same. They obscure the truth. And this can never be a matter of degree. Either truth is apparent or it is not. It cannot be partially recognized. Who is unaware of truth must look upon illusions. This is a theme that the Course touches on a lot. You're either aware of truth or you're lost in illusion. And it really tries to cut out the ambiguity of there being any middle ground between those. So in any holy instant where you're not actively believing in illusions and you're just present, that is the salvation right there. You're tasting it. And then as soon as the mind goes into, but what if, but I'm, what if this, and yes, and, but, then you're in the illusions and believing something false about yourself, of being separate and being lacking and having problems. And, that's part of the ongoing refinement, is learning to be with what is, with truth, and then seeing how we actually leave that, seeing the particularities of our own ways of leaving that, and then learning how to stay with truth even as those illusions are flowing out from it, and then learning how to love even the appearance of the illusion without getting sucked into thinking that it defines us, who and what we are. Anger in response to perceived magic thoughts is a basic cause of fear. Consider what this reaction means, and its centrality in the world's thought system becomes apparent. So I'm curious about this. A magic thought by its mere presence acknowledges a separation from God. It states in the clearest form possible that the mind which believes it has a separate will that can oppose the will of God, the one will, the true will, also believes it can succeed. That this can hardly be a fact is obvious, yet that it can be believed as fact is equally obvious, so that we have a separate will, and that as a separate will, we can succeed apart from God. This is magic thinking. It's also separation, just the belief in separation, but the belief that we can get something apart from our Creator, apart from the source of what we are, really apart from our true self with a capital S. Of course, we can never be separate from our source, because it is our source. It is our life. It is the awareness that lives through us. So we can't be separate from it. Yet it can seem that way, and we can very clearly believe that we are. And herein lies the birthplace of guilt. So this belief in separation leads to the feeling of guilt. Who usurps the place of God and takes it for himself now has a deadly enemy. God as our enemy, because we are separate now, and he must stand alone in his protection, fists up, making it happen, magic thoughts in a magic world of separation, and make himself a shield to keep him safe from fury that can never be abated, and vengeance that can never be satisfied. So when we believe we're separate, we are in a never-ending defense from fury. And we're in fear. We are in fear because we believe we've separated from our very source. How can this unfair battle be resolved? Its ending is inevitable, for its outcomes must be death. How then can one believe in one's defenses? Magic again must help. Forget the battle, accept it as a fact, and then forget it. Do not remember the impossible odds against you. Do not remember the immensity of the enemy, and do not think about your frailty in comparison. Accept your separation, but do not remember how it came about. Believe that you have won it, but do not retain the slightest memory of who your great opponent really is. Projecting your forgetting onto him, it seems to you he has forgotten too. So this is kind of like the story of how we move even further into the illusion. We forget that we left God, and that's the source of our suffering. And then we just go out into the magic world and even try to forget that we're in terror, forget that we feel guilty. Just project it all out into the world, into things, people, places. Don't remember that our true enemy is apparently God, not our true enemy, but the enemy that we've created for ourselves. So we try to forget even the details of how it all began and how we got into this seeming predicament. Because it seems like once you take the first step into magic thinking, the only possible solution is even more magical thinking to sort of hide and soften and abate the fear that's there. But what will now be your reaction to all magic thoughts? They can but reawaken sleeping guilt, which you have hidden but have not let go. Each one says clearly to your frightened mind, "You have usurped the place of God." Dun dun dun. Think not he has forgotten. So this is God as our enemy. Here we have the fear of God most starkly represented. For in that thought has guilt already raised madness to the throne of God himself. And now there is no hope, except to kill. Here is salvation now. An angry father pursues his guilty son. In a way, this reminds me of like the Old Testament of the Bible, where God is a very fearful God. You know, it shows this unconscious relationship of feeling like we've wronged God and now God is chasing us. kill or be killed, for here alone is choice. Beyond this there is none, for what was done cannot be done without. So we can never undo the guilt that's at the root. This is what the ego would tell us. You've done a grave error, and it can never be undone. So just run, run, run. Fight, fight, fight. Yeah, you're welcome. The stain of blood can never be removed, and anyone who bears the stain on him must meet with death. So this is the death wish of the egoic thought system. Into this hopeless situation, God sends his teachers. So we're finally coming to the graceful answer here. They bring the light of hope from God himself. There is a way in which escape is possible. It can be learned and taught, but it requires patience and abundant willingness. Given that, the lesson's manifest simplicity stands out like an intense white light against a black horizon, for such it is. If anger comes from an interpretation and not a fact, it is never justified. Once this is even dimly grasped, the way is open. So this reminds me of, again, the suffering I was experiencing today. There was a lot of anger in it. I could feel it. But I've learned now that the anger is never justified. Does that mean that I deny its existence in my reality? Not really. Like, you feel it and you take responsibility for having created it. I've created this. How am I creating this? How am I creating this? But you can't do that without looking at it. So there's a false kind of denial that says, this isn't real, I'm not angry. This isn't real, I'm not angry. But it's like, you already believed in it. So the anger seems to be here. And now we have to look at it with the Holy Spirit in order to undo it. We have to look at the very roots of it in order to undo it. But it's not justified, which means we take full responsibility for its creation. We don't say, well, it's because of that person over there, and therefore it is totally justified. I'm justified in my anger. Once this is even dimly grasped, the way is open. Now it is possible to take the next step. The interpretation can be changed at last. Magic thoughts need not lead to condemnation, for they do not really have the power to give rise to guilt. And so they can be overlooked and thus forgotten in the truest sense. Overlooked, it's almost like underlooked. Like we look right through them, right under them, right through the roots of them, and see that they're not really there in the way that we thought they were. Madness but seems terrible. In truth, it has no power to make anything. Like the magic which becomes its servant, it neither attacks nor protects. It's madness, it's illusion. It seems to attack, it seems to protect, but in truth it has not accomplished either of these. Because it never actually separated from its source, it never separated from God. It's a false duality, a false fear, a false guilt, a false sense of separation. To see it and to recognize its thought system is to look on nothing. Can nothing give rise to anger? Hardly so. Remember then, teacher of God, that anger recognizes a reality that is not there. Yet is the anger certain witness that you do believe in it is a fact. Yet is the anger certain witness that you do believe in it as fact. So the anger shows that we are believing in an illusion. So it's a good indicator. Oh, I'm angry. I must be believing something that's not true. Now is escape impossible until you see you have responded to your own interpretation. Like, what does this mean to me? That's where you can start to get into interesting work in the mind about the belief systems that are underlying the emotions or covering over the emotions, which you have projected on an outside world. Let this grim sword be taken from you now. There is no death. This sword does not exist. The fear of God is causeless, but his love is cause of everything beyond all fear, and thus forever real and always true. The fear of God is causeless. It's causeless. It's a mistake in the mind. It's an identity mistake. Just believing that we left our source. But his love is cause of everything beyond all fear, and thus forever real and always true. I've been having a lot of it's been very fruitful for me to just become conscious of the fear that's in my mind, to make it conscious rather than denying that I'm experiencing it. Because first we have to be conscious of our suffering before we can correct it. It's not really in time like that, but we have to look upon anger in order to forgive anger. We have to look upon fear in order to forgive fear. So it's been very fruitful for me to admit to myself, I'm feeling scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm feeling fear. It's like in the body, you know. It's very visceral, in the nervous system. And then allowing the peace and presence of my infinite higher self to be with me in that experience. I'm afraid, I'm scared. Can we look on this together? Can we look on this together? And you don't rush to peace. Peace is always here. Peace is what we are. And so it's really the undoing of the illusion of something other than peace that is so fruitful in getting to the very roots of our suffering and finding a peace that cannot be threatened. So I feel this passage really did answer the call of the heart to see more clearly what I was experiencing today. And I hope you can see that we're all just in process here. And there's a humility in just embracing the curriculum that God has given us, and not just thinking, not trying to create ourselves as something holier than we are, because we are already perfect holiness. That's the truth of what we are. So we don't have to make ourselves holy. And you know, I'm speaking this because I'm speaking to myself, you know. I've tried to become more holy. And I hope that, well, it is like this, my reality will keep catching me out on that. Because in truth, that's not what I want. I want to be free of suffering. And to be free of suffering means to embrace and become a happy learner. And a happy learner it's a humble position, and we're constantly humbled as we embrace our life exactly the way it is, in all its imperfection and messiness. And the suffering becomes our greatest teacher, our greatest gift, our greatest ally in the undoing of illusion and magical thinking. So I'm grateful for you being here with me and joining with me in this exploration. And I'm grateful to the Holy Spirit for being here with me and guiding me through this exploration. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you.